The Apache women in the saloon mocked the cowboy. Tonight he proved he was no coward. The town sat on the edge of the wild land, where the desert met the mountains. It was the kind of place where the wind always seemed to be blowing dust into every corner. The buildings were mostly wood, with creaky floors and swinging doors. People came here to find work, to start over, or to run from something they did not want to remember. The saloon stood in the center of everything, shining like a bright, noisy light in the middle of all the quiet desert. It was late afternoon when the cowboy arrived. He was not the kind of man people talked about. He did not have a loud voice or a famous name. He looked tired and his clothes were worn. His hat was pulled low over his eyes, and his boots had seen many miles of dusty roads. He walked slowly, like someone who had learned to watch the world carefully. The saloon door swung open with a loud creak. Inside, the air was warm and thick with smoke and laughter. The room was full of people. Men sat at tables playing cards and drinking. A few stood by the bar, talking and watching the door. A piano played in the corner, and the sound mixed with the voices until it became a kind of wild music. The cowboy paused for a moment in the doorway. He looked around, taking in the faces. Some stared at him, curious. Others did not bother to look at all. He did not seem nervous, but he also did not seem confident. It was as if he was used to being ignored. He walked toward the bar. His boots made a soft sound on the wooden floor. The closer he got, the louder the room seemed to become. He found a spot at the end of the bar and sat down. He did not order anything right away. He just rested his hands on the counter and waited. The bartender looked at him for a moment, then nodded. The cowboy's eyes were calm, but there was something in them that made people feel unsure. He did not look like a man who would start trouble. But he also did not look like a man who would run from it. A group of women sat near the back of the saloon. They were Apache women. They wore colorful dresses, and their hair was neatly braided. They were laughing and talking with each other. Their voices were loud and confident. In this town, it was rare to see women like them inside a saloon, and the men in the room noticed them immediately. The Apache women had come to town to trade and to visit. They were not there to cause problems. They were simply living their lives just like everyone else. But in a place like this, people were quick to judge anyone who seemed different. The women noticed the cowboy sitting alone. They watched him quietly at first. They could tell he was not from around there. He looked too quiet, too careful. He looked like someone who had been through a lot, but had not yet found a place where he belonged. One of the women leaned forward and whispered something to the others. They smiled. Then another woman spoke, not loudly, but clearly enough for the people near them to hear. "Look at him," she said. "He looks like a boy who has lost his way." The other women laughed softly. The sound carried through the room, and some of the men turned to see what was happening. The cowboy did not notice at first. He was staring at the floor, thinking. But when he finally looked up, he saw the women looking at him. He felt their eyes, and he felt the smile on their faces. He did not smile back. He did not say anything. He simply stayed where he was, as if he had no reason to join their laughter. The women began to speak more. Their words were not cruel, but they were sharp. They teased him about his clothes, his hat, and his quiet manner. They made jokes about him being weak or afraid. They spoke in a way that made the cowboy feel small, even though they did not touch him or threaten him. The men in the saloon started to laugh too. Some of them shouted comments, trying to be louder than the women. "Go, co, co." They wanted to show that they were the ones in control. The room filled with noise. The cowboy sat still like a statue. He felt the embarrassment rising in his chest. It was a strange feeling. He was not used to being laughed at. In the places he had been before, people did not bother to pay attention to him. Here, everyone was looking at him. He could feel their eyes like little needles. The cowboy looked down at his hands. His fingers were rough and calloused. He had worked hard. He had traveled far. He had faced things he did not like to remember. He did not want to be laughed at for no reason. But he also knew something important. He knew that if he reacted too quickly, the situation would become worse. He had seen how men in saloons could become dangerous when they were embarrassed. He had seen fights start from a single word. So he kept quiet. He did not answer. He did not even look at the women again. He simply waited for the laughter to die down. The women continued to talk, but their laughter began to soften. The men, satisfied that they had made their point, turned back to their games and drinks. The saloon returned to its normal noise. The cowboy stayed at the bar, silent. The bartender poured a drink and placed it in front of him. The cowboy nodded his thanks and took a slow sip. He did not drink fast. He did not try to prove anything. He simply drank like a man who wanted to calm his mind. As the night grew darker, more people arrived. The saloon became even busier. Music played louder. The air became heavier with smoke. The cowboy stayed in his seat, watching the room. He noticed the Apache women again. They were still laughing, still talking. They had not forgotten him. In fact, it seemed like they were enjoying the fact that they had gotten a reaction out of the room. They were not cruel, but they were confident. They liked to test people. One of the women stood up and walked toward the cowboy. The room quieted slightly. People turned to watch, waiting to see what would happen next. The woman stopped in front of him. She looked him in the eyes. The cowboy did not move. He did not look away. He met her gaze.
"You're quiet,"
she said. "You must be scared." The cowboy took another sip of his drink. He thought for a moment. Then he spoke in a calm voice. "I'm not scared," he said. "I'm just not loud." The woman smiled. "Quiet men are the easiest to scare," she replied. The cowboy did not answer. He simply looked at her. He did not show anger, but he also did not show fear. He was like a river that did not rush, but also would not be stopped. The woman turned and walked back to her friends. The room laughed again, but this time it was not as loud. The people were curious now. They wanted to know more about this quiet man. They wanted to see if he would react. The cowboy finished his drink and stood up. He did not seem upset. He did not seem eager to leave. He simply stood up, like a man who knew where he was going. He walked toward the door, but he stopped for a moment. He looked around the saloon. He looked at the men who had laughed at him. He looked at the women who had teased him. He did not speak. He did not raise his voice. Then he walked out into the night. The town continued to live its life inside the saloon. The music played. The laughter continued. The Apache women returned to their tables, still smiling. The men returned to their games, still talking about the quiet cowboy. No one knew what to make of him. Some thought he was weak. Some thought he was strange. Some thought he was hiding something. But one thing was certain. The cowboy had left the saloon. And the story of that night had only just begun. Because in this town, a man's reputation was everything. And tonight, the cowboy's reputation had been questioned in front of everyone. The laughter had been loud. The mocking had been clear, but the cowboy did not leave angry. He left thinking, and that was the kind of man who could change everything. The cowboy stepped out into the night air. The sky was clear and full of stars. The wind carried the smell of dried grass and dust. He stood for a moment outside the saloon, listening to the sounds coming from inside. The music and laughter continued, but now they seemed far away, like a story he had already heard. He walked slowly down the street. The town was quiet at this hour. A few people passed by, but most had already gone home. The cowboy did not hurry. He seemed calm, but his mind was busy. He could still feel the laughter in the saloon. He could still hear the voices of the Apache women. The words stayed in his mind, like a small stone that would not leave his shoe. He reached the edge of town and stopped near the fence that separated the town from the open land. The fence was old and worn, but it stood tall. Beyond it, the desert spread out like a dark sea. He looked at the land and thought about his life. He had not always been a quiet man. Once he had been someone who spoke freely, who laughed easily. But life had changed him. How? He had seen things that made him careful. He had learned that words could start fights, and fights could destroy lives. The cowboy sat on a rock near the fence and rested. He thought about the way the Apache women had mocked him. He wondered why they had done it. Was it just for fun? Or was there something more? He had heard stories about how some people treated others who were different. He had seen it before. He did not want to be the kind of man who cared too much about what others thought. But he also did not want to be the kind of man who let others disrespect him. He was stuck between these two thoughts. After a while, he stood up and walked back toward town. He did not go back to the saloon. Instead, he walked to the small stable behind the general store. His horse was there, tied to a post. The horse looked tired, but it was loyal. The cowboy untied the rope and patted the horse's neck. "Easy," he said softly. "We'll find a place to rest." He led the horse to a quiet spot behind the stable. He gave it some water and then sat down beside it. He looked at the horse's eyes. They were calm, like the horse understood him. The cowboy thought about the future. He did not know what would happen next, but he knew one thing. He could not let people think he was weak. He needed to find a way to show them he was not afraid. The next morning, the sun rose slowly. The town began to wake up. People came out of their homes and started their daily work. The saloon opened its doors again, and the music started once more. But the mood was different. The story of the previous night had spread through the town like a small fire. People talked about the cowboy. They whispered about his silence. Some laughed again. Others looked at the saloon door, waiting to see if he would return. The Apache women were still there, sitting at their table. They were smiling, but their smiles had changed. They were no longer just laughing. They were watching. They were waiting to see if the cowboy would come back and prove something. The cowboy did not go to the saloon that day. Instead, he walked to the town's small market. He bought supplies for his journey. He bought a few items, but he did not spend much money. He did not want to draw attention to himself. He walked through the market slowly, but he noticed the way people looked at him. They looked at him with curiosity. Some looked at him with judgment. The cowboy felt a strange feeling inside him. He felt like he was being watched, like a person in a play. He decided to leave the town for a while. He needed to think. He needed to find peace. He needed to find a place where no one would judge him. He returned to his horse and began to prepare for the journey. He checked his saddle, his ropes, and his water supplies. He made sure everything was ready. He was careful. He wanted to be safe. As he prepared, he saw a young boy watching him. The boy was about 10 years old. He stood near the stable, holding a small toy horse in his hands. The boy looked curious and a little scared. The cowboy noticed him and smiled gently. "Hello," he said. "What's your name?" The boy hesitated, then said, "Tom." "Tom," the cowboy repeated. "Do you like horses?" Tom nodded. "Yes," he said. "I want to be a cowboy like you." The cowboy looked at the boy and felt something warm inside. He remembered being young and dreaming about being brave and strong. He remembered the way he had wanted to be respected. He knelt down to be closer to Tom's height. "Being a cowboy is not only about riding," he said. "It's about being kind, too. And being brave means doing what is right, even when people laugh." Tom looked at him with wide eyes. "Do people laugh at you?" he asked. The cowboy paused for a moment. He thought about the saloon, the laughter, the Apache women, and the way the town looked at him. He did not want to lie to the boy, but he also did not want to share the pain. "Yes," he said softly. "Sometimes people laugh, but it does not mean you are weak." Tom nodded slowly. He seemed to understand. Then he said, "I think you are brave." The cowboy smiled. "Thank you," he said. "That means a lot." Tom ran off to his home, leaving the cowboy alone again. The cowboy felt a new sense of purpose. He realized that he could not let the town decide who he was. He needed to decide for himself. As the day passed, the cowboy rode out of town. He did not go far. He found a quiet place near a small creek. He cooked a small meal and rested. The land around him was calm. The wind was gentle. The sounds of the town were far away. He sat by the creek and thought about the Apache women. He wondered if they had any reason for teasing him. He wondered if they were testing him. He wondered if they had ever been judged themselves. He remembered the way the women had looked at him. Their eyes were strong and confident. They seemed to enjoy the power of their words. He realized that they were not cruel. They were simply proud. He also realized something else. He realized that the town was not the only place where he could prove himself. He could prove himself by being true to his values. He could prove himself by being kind, even when people were not kind to him. As the sun began to set, the cowboy packed his things. He was ready to return to town. He felt calmer now. He felt more sure of himself. He rode back toward the town, thinking about what he would do next. He did not want to cause trouble. He did not want to fight, but he also did not want to be ignored. He arrived at the town just as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. The sky turned orange and pink. The town began to light its lamps. The saloon door swung open, and music began to play. The cowboy stopped near the saloon. He looked at it for a moment. He could hear the laughter inside. He could feel the eyes watching him again. He thought about leaving again. But something inside him told him to stay. He walked toward the saloon. His steps were steady. He did not rush. He did not show fear. He did not show anger. He simply walked in. The room quieted slightly. People turned to look at him. The Apache women looked up and smiled. Their smiles were not cruel now. They were more like a challenge. The cowboy walked to the bar and sat down. He ordered a drink. He did not speak to anyone. He simply sat there, calm and quiet. The room was full of people, but the silence felt heavy. Everyone was waiting for something to happen. They were waiting to see what the cowboy would do next. And the cowboy, without saying a word, made everyone understand that he was not the kind of man who could be judged by laughter. He was ready to show them who he really was. The saloon was full again. The music was louder than before. The lights were bright, and the room was crowded with people. The air was warm and heavy with smoke. The cowboy sat quietly at the bar, his eyes scanning the room. He could feel the eyes of the people watching him. He could feel the quiet tension in the air. Everyone was waiting to see what he would do. The Apache women were still there, sitting at their table. They were talking softly, but their voices were full of confidence. They had already tested the cowboy once. Now they wanted to see if he would react. They were curious. They wanted to know if he would be the same quiet man or if he would become someone else. The cowboy did not look at them. He did not smile. He did not show fear. He simply sat there and drank his drink slowly. His calm presence seemed to make the room feel even more tense. The men in the saloon began to talk quietly among themselves. "What is he thinking?" one man whispered. "He must be planning something," another said. "He should just leave," a third man said. "He does not belong here." The cowboy heard the words, but he did not react. He knew that if he showed anger, the situation would become worse. He also knew that if he left, the town would continue to think he was weak. He was stuck between two choices. Then, a man in the corner of the saloon stood up. He was tall and loud. He had a rough voice and a big hat. He had been one of the men who laughed at the cowboy the night before. Now he walked toward the cowboy with a smile on his face. "Hey there," the man said loudly. "You back again?" The cowboy looked up. He met the man's eyes. He did not smile. "Yes," he said quietly. The man laughed. "You must like being laughed at," he said. "You are too quiet to be a real cowboy." The room laughed again. The cowboy stayed calm. He did not answer. He simply looked at the man. The tall man leaned closer. "Why don't you say something?" he asked. "Are you scared?" The cowboy took a deep breath. He looked around the room. He saw the faces of the people. He saw the Apache women watching. He saw the boy from earlier, standing near the door, watching with wide eyes. The cowboy thought about what he had told the boy, that being brave meant doing what was right. He knew that if he spoke harshly, it would only make the man feel stronger. If he ignored him, the man would feel like he had won. So he chose a different path. He smiled slightly, just enough to show he was not angry. Then he spoke in a calm voice. "I'm not scared," he said. "I'm just not loud." The room went quiet. The tall man's smile faded. The Apache women looked surprised. The other men looked confused. The cowboy's words were simple, but they had a strange power. They did not challenge the man directly, but they also did not let him win. The tall man's face turned red. He did not like being ignored. He wanted to prove he was the one in control. He raised his voice and said, "You think you're better than us?" The cowboy shook his head. "No," he said. I just don't need to shout to be heard." The tall man stepped closer, but before he could say anything else, a loud sound came from outside the saloon. It was a noise that stopped everyone's conversation. It sounded like a horse running fast, and many people turned their heads to look out the window. The door of the saloon swung open. A man rushed in looking worried. He was out of breath, and his face was pale. He held a piece of paper in his hand. "Listen," he shouted. "There is trouble outside town. Something is happening on the road. We need help." The room went silent. People looked at each other, confused and worried. The tall man's face changed. He looked nervous now. The Apache women stood up, their faces serious. Even the music stopped. The man with the paper explained. "A group of travelers are stuck on the road. The bridge is damaged, and they cannot cross. They need someone to guide them safely." The road is dangerous, and they might get lost. The people in the saloon began to talk quickly. Some said they would help. Others said it was too risky. The tall man who had been mocking the cowboy looked around, trying to find someone else to take the risk. The cowboy stood up slowly. He looked at the man with the paper. He looked at the faces in the room. He thought about the boy who was watching. He thought about what it meant to be brave. Then he spoke. "I'll go," he said. The room went quiet again. The tall man looked shocked. The Apache women looked at the cowboy with new interest. The other men stared at him as if they could not believe their ears. The tall man laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. "You," he said, "you want to go out there? You're the one who can't even speak up for yourself." The cowboy looked at him calmly. "Yes," he said, "I will go." The tall man looked angry now. He stepped forward, trying to block the cowboy. "You can't go alone," he said. "You will get lost." The cowboy did not move. "I have traveled this land before," he said. "I know how to find my way." The tall man shook his head. "You are not ready," he said. "You are not brave enough." The cowboy took a deep breath. He did not want to fight. He did not want to argue. He just wanted to do what was right. "I am ready," he said softly, "and I will help." The tall man looked at the crowd. He wanted someone else to volunteer, but no one did. The room was full of people, but everyone was afraid. Everyone was waiting for someone else to act. The Apache women stepped forward. One of them spoke clearly and calmly. "If he is willing to help," she said, "then we should let him." The tall man turned to her, surprised. He had not expected her to support the cowboy. He looked angry, but he did not argue. The man with the paper nodded. "We need someone to guide the travelers," he said. "If you can help, please do." The cowboy nodded. He walked to the door. He stepped outside. The air was cool and quiet. The stars shone above. He looked toward the road. The land was dark, but he could see the path leading out of town. He could feel the weight of the town's eyes on him. He knew that if he failed, the people would laugh again. If he succeeded, they would respect him. He mounted his horse. The horse snorted softly, sensing the tension. The cowboy adjusted his saddle and looked back at the saloon one last time. The Apache women stood near the door, watching. The tall man stood with his arms crossed, watching. The boy stood at the side, watching with hope. The cowboy raised his hands slightly as if saying goodbye. Then he rode out into the night. The road was dark and quiet. The moonlight showed the path. The cowboy rode carefully, but he rode with purpose. He knew the land was not easy. He knew the road could be dangerous, but he also knew that he had a responsibility now. He rode toward the travelers, ready to prove that he was not a coward. He was ready to show the town that courage did not mean being loud. Courage meant being calm and strong when it mattered most. And the night was only beginning. The cowboy rode into the dark night. The stars were bright, but the road was still hard to see. The land around him was quiet. Only the sound of his horse's hooves and the soft wind could be heard. He kept his eyes on the road, careful not to miss any turn or sign. He rode for a while, and the town behind him became a small group of lights. He felt a strange feeling in his chest. It was not fear. It was more like responsibility. He had decided to help, and now he had to do it well. The road led into a valley between two hills. The valley was known for being tricky. People often got lost there because the path was not clear. The cowboy knew this. He had traveled this land before, and he remembered the small rocks and the old tree that marked the safe path. He reached the valley and slowed his horse. He listened carefully. The night was quiet, but he could hear a faint sound far ahead. It sounded like voices. He tightened his grip on the reins and moved forward slowly. As he got closer, he saw the travelers. They were a small group of people, and they looked worried. Their horses were standing still, and some of them were holding lanterns. They looked tired and confused. The bridge they needed to cross was damaged. It had broken in the middle, and the travelers did not know how to get across safely. The cowboy rode up to them and greeted them calmly. "Hello," he said. "I'm here to help." The travelers looked surprised. One of them stepped forward. He was an older man with a tired face. "Thank you," he said. "We did not know what to do. The road is dangerous, and we are far from town." The cowboy nodded. "I know this area," he said. "I can guide you to a safer path." The travelers looked at each other, relieved. They began to trust him. The older man explained, "We are traveling to the next town. We have supplies and goods. We must reach there soon." The cowboy listened carefully. He knew that time was important. He also knew that the travelers were scared. He wanted to make them feel safe. He spoke softly and confidently. "Follow me," he said. "We will find a way." The cowboy walked his horse slowly, leading the travelers. He used his knowledge of the land to guide them through the valley. He pointed out small signs that showed the correct path. He warned them about slippery rocks and soft ground. He did not rush. He wanted to make sure everyone stayed safe. As they moved forward, the travelers began to relax. They started to talk with each other, and their voices grew calmer. The older man thanked the cowboy again. "You are very kind," he said. "We did not expect help from someone we do not know." The cowboy smiled. "It is the right thing to do," he said. "We should help each other." The travelers continued to follow him. They moved carefully, but they were making progress. The cowboy's calm attitude made them feel confident. They trusted him, and that trust made the journey easier. After a while, the path led to a small hill. From the top of the hill, the cowboy could see the next part of the road. He saw the town lights in the distance. The travelers let out a small cheer. They felt hope again. They knew they were close, but the cowboy noticed something else. He saw a group of animals near the road. They were wild and curious. The travelers had not seen them yet. The cowboy knew that if the animals came too close, they might scare the travelers' horses. That could cause trouble. He stopped the group and pointed to the animals. "Stay calm," he said. "Do not let your horses get nervous." The travelers listened. They trusted him. They held their horses steady and kept their voices low. The cowboy slowly moved forward, guiding the group around the animals. He used the land to keep a safe distance. He did not rush, and he did not panic. The animals watched them but did not approach. The travelers continued on, safe and calm. The cowboy breathed a small sigh of relief. He knew that he had done well so far. He had guided them through a difficult area without causing fear or confusion. The group continued on the road. The night grew darker, but the moonlight helped them see. The cowboy kept his eyes on the path. He watched for any signs of danger. He did not want to make any mistakes. After some time, they reached a small creek. The water was shallow, but it was wide. The travelers were worried because they did not know if their horses could cross safely. The cowboy walked to the edge of the creek and checked the ground. He tested the water and looked for a safe spot. He found a place where the water was shallow and the ground was stable. He called to the travelers, "This is a good place to cross. Go slowly." The travelers moved their horses carefully into the water. The horses stepped slowly, feeling the ground. The travelers held the reins tightly. The cowboy stayed near them, guiding them. He did not leave their side. One of the travelers slipped slightly, but the cowboy was quick. He reached out and helped steady the horse. The traveler looked grateful. "Thank you," he said. The cowboy nodded. "It's okay," he said. "We are almost there." The group crossed the creek safely. They continued on the path. The town lights grew closer. The travelers felt hopeful again. The cowboy felt something else too. He felt proud. Not because he wanted praise, but because he had done something good. He had helped people when they needed it. He had proven to himself that he could be brave without being loud. As they got closer to the town, the cowboy noticed the sky changing. The stars were still bright, but the sky was starting to lighten. The sun was about to rise. The night was ending, and a new day was beginning. The travelers looked at the town lights with relief. They knew they would be safe soon. They thanked the cowboy again and again. The older man said, "You have a kind heart. You are a good person." The cowboy smiled quietly. "I just did what I could," he said. The travelers reached the town safely. The people there welcomed them. They were relieved to see them return. The cowboy watched from a distance. He felt a sense of peace. He turned his horse and began to ride back toward the town where he had been mocked. He knew the people there would be waiting to see what happened. He wondered how they would react. As he approached the town, he could see the saloon. The lights were still on, and the music was playing. He could hear the sound of laughter. The town looked the same as before, but he felt different. He rode toward the saloon and stopped outside. He did not enter right away. He waited for a moment. He wanted to make sure the town saw him. He wanted them to understand that he had helped the travelers. He walked into the saloon slowly. The room went quiet. The Apache women were still there, but their smiles were different now. They looked at him with respect. The tall man who had mocked him the night before looked surprised. The boy from earlier watched with wide eyes. The cowboy did not speak loudly. He did not brag. He simply walked to the bar and placed his hat on the counter. He sat down and ordered a drink. The room remained quiet. The people were thinking. They had seen something they did not expect. The cowboy had returned, and he had returned with proof that he was not a coward. The Apache women looked at him and smiled. They did not laugh anymore. The tall man did not mock him. The room had changed. The town had changed. And the cowboy, sitting quietly at the bar, felt that something inside him had changed too. The saloon was quiet. The music had slowed down, and the room felt different. People were not laughing loudly anymore. The air was calm, but it was full of thoughts. Everyone was watching the cowboy. He sat at the bar, his hat on the counter, his drink in his hand. He looked tired, but his eyes were calm. He did not look like a man who wanted attention. He looked like a man who had done what he believed was right. The Apache women were still sitting at their table. They were not laughing. They were watching the cowboy carefully. Their faces were serious now, not mocking. They had seen him help the travelers. They had seen him guide them through the dangerous road. They had seen him remain calm when things were difficult. The tall man who had mocked the cowboy earlier was standing near the corner. He looked different now. He did not look angry. He looked thoughtful. His face showed that he had changed his opinion. He had expected the cowboy to be weak, but now he realized that he was wrong. The boy who had watched the cowboy the night before was still there too. He stood near the door, holding his toy horse. His eyes were full of admiration. He had seen something important. He had seen what true bravery looked like. The cowboy sat quietly, but his mind was busy. He thought about what had happened. He thought about the travelers and the road. He thought about the town and the people who had mocked him. He felt a strange feeling of relief. He was glad that he had done what he believed was right. He also felt something else. He felt the weight of the town's opinion. He knew that some people would still think he was weak. Some people would still laugh. He knew that he could not change everyone's mind, but he had changed the minds of some people. That was enough. The bartender came over and placed a clean glass in front of the cowboy. He nodded respectfully. "You did good," he said quietly. The cowboy looked up. "I just did what was right," he said. The bartender smiled. "That is the hardest thing to do," he said. "Most people do not choose the right thing." The cowboy nodded. He did not argue. He knew the bartender was right. He had seen many people choose the easy path. He had seen many people choose to laugh at others instead of helping. The Apache women stood up and walked toward the cowboy. The room watched in silence. The women did not look angry or proud. They looked calm and respectful. One of the women spoke. Her voice was clear and strong. "You proved yourself," she said. "We were wrong to mock you." The cowboy looked at her. He did not smile, but his face showed a small sign of relief. "Thank you," he said softly. "I understand why you were curious, but I did not want to be judged by laughter." The woman nodded. "We are not all cruel," she said. "We were testing you. We wanted to see if you were true to your words." The cowboy listened. He felt a new understanding. He realized that the Apache women had not been cruel. They had been curious. They had been testing him, as people sometimes test each other to understand who they really are. Another woman spoke. "You did not need to prove anything," she said. "But you did, and now we respect you." The cowboy nodded. He felt a small smile form on his face. He had never expected to hear those words. He had never expected respect from the people who had mocked him. The tall man from earlier stepped forward. He looked at the cowboy with a new expression. "I'm sorry," he said. "I judged you too quickly." The cowboy looked at him. He could see the honesty in the man's eyes. He knew that the man was truly sorry. "It's okay," the cowboy said. "We all make mistakes." The tall man nodded. He looked at the room. "I think we all learned something," he said. "We should not judge people by how they speak or how they look. We should judge them by what they do." The room quieted. The people looked at each other. They began to understand. The town had been too quick to judge. They had been too quick to laugh. They had been too quick to assume. The boy near the door stepped forward. He walked up to the cowboy and held out his toy horse. "Here," he said. "This is for you." The cowboy looked surprised. "Why?" he asked. The boy smiled. "Because you are brave," he said, "and because you helped people. You are a real cowboy." The cowboy took the toy horse. He looked at it carefully. He held it in his hands. He felt a warm feeling inside. He looked at the boy and nodded. "Thank you," he said. The boy ran back to his place near the door. He watched the cowboy with pride. He had seen a real lesson that night. He had seen that bravery is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet. The cowboy finished his drink and stood up. He looked around the room one last time. The people were no longer laughing. They were talking quietly, thinking about what had happened. The Apache women returned to their table. The tall man returned to his seat. The boy returned to his place. The room returned to its normal life, but the mood had changed. The town had changed. The cowboy walked to the door and stepped outside. The night air was cool. The sky was full of stars. He looked up at the sky and took a deep breath. He felt calm. He felt proud. He felt peaceful. He walked to his horse, which was waiting near the stable. He untied the rope and mounted. He looked back at the town one last time. He could see the saloon lights shining in the distance. He could see the small houses and the quiet streets. He knew he would never forget this town. He knew the town would never forget him. The cowboy rode out of town. He did not ride fast. He rode slowly, enjoying the quiet. He felt the wind on his face. He felt the freedom of the open land. He thought about the Apache women. He thought about how they had tested him. He thought about how they had changed their minds. He thought about how respect was earned, not demanded. He thought about the boy. He thought about how a small child could see the truth better than adults sometimes. He thought about how the boy's simple words had touched him. The cowboy continued his journey. He did not know where he would go next. He did not know what would happen, but he knew something important now. He knew that courage was not about being loud. It was not about proving yourself in front of others. It was about doing what is right, even when no one is watching. And that was the true story of the night when the Apache women mocked the cowboy, and the night when he proved he was no coward.